Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started today. Welcome to today's presentation, Complementary Supports for Recovery, the role of peer recovery coach supports and recovery court. This webinar series is made possible by a grant award from SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. We are excited to provide this virtual series during the month of September, which is National Recovery Month. Today's session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the CMH YouTube channel for future reference. Please feel free to use the chat box to ask questions and add comments you have at any time during the webinar. And if time allows at the end, we will do our best to answer as many questions as possible. Our presenters today are Bill Slusher, Clinical Supervisor overseeing Substance Use Disorder Services Mobile Crisis Unit and Recovery Court, and Caitlin Griswold, who is a certified recovery coach. And with that, we'll turn it over to Bill.
Okay, sorry about that. Hi, I'm Bill Slusher, excuse me, supervisor over the SUD services, which encompasses recovery court as kind of a subset of those services. So I thought, and of course with me here is Caitlin, who's going to talk more about recovery coaching. So I thought first I would try and give you a brief overview of recovery court and show you a little bit about where it came from and what it's turned into. So courts like this have been around for quite a while. They're much more commonly known as drug courts. They exist in every state and most counties in every state, depending on size and demographics and things like that. St. Clair County probably took on the challenge of developing our own version of this, of drug court, which we're calling recovery court, about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. Because we're dividing the world into pre-COVID and after COVID, this means we're going on pre-COVID, and we actually got the court moving and operating before the COVID pandemic hit. So it was live, in-person experience for people who started in the program. So we started meeting as, obviously we are governed in St. Clair County CMH by the PIHP. Several years ago, we got the CCVHC grant. And part of being a CCVHC, of course, is integrating substance use services into our services. Now, of course, anybody who's worked here knows we provided substance use services previously, but to get those, someone had to be a person who qualified for CMH in the traditional manner. Person with severe mental illness, with intellectual disabilities, things like that. The difference with the CCVHC is when we created SUD services, someone did not have to qualify with a severe mental illness to get SUD services. They could come in strictly with a substance use disorder. So that was the big sea change. And we're still kind of working through nuances of that change to this day. So a couple other things kind of evolved. So we had SUD services in place as we're developing recovery court. It was decided that at the state level that recovery court falls under SUD services. It's not strictly that somebody who's in CMH and mental health services can't go to recovery court. So that is an option that hasn't happened, I think, at all, if not more than once so far in our county, but it's something that could happen. So we'll talk a little bit now about what recovery court is. The template or the model that most people have at CMH is mental health court. It's probably a decent analogy for what happens in recovery court, with a few kind of important differences. The judge who was involved from the beginning and actually was kind of a big advocate for developing recovery court was Judge Monahan. And it's a little bit interesting. He is not a probate judge, of course. Judge Tomlinson is a probate judge, but Judge Monahan, who is in the criminal arena, oversees recovery court, which is kind of important to know. Mental health court and recovery court are both forms of probation, but one takes place under probate, one takes place under criminal hospice. So that's kind of the first difference to understand. The other thing that's structurally a little bit different is recovery court kind of meets differently in a different sort of format. Recovery court, the team meets previous to court. It's kind of an odd way to say that, but the recovery court team meets every week. That doesn't necessarily happen with mental health court. So the judge, the prosecuting attorney, the public defender, the probation officer, and CMH all meet every week before recovery court takes place. They talk about anything they need to talk about, usually who's going to be present in court that day, anybody else who might be doing well, might be struggling still, and kind of figure out what changes or adaptations they might need to recommend. Then everybody comes in who's scheduled to be seen that week. They all sit together in court, kind of in the jury box usually, and everybody talks about how they're doing. Everybody reports in, talks about what's working, what might need, modification in their treatment, and kind of hash things out. If you've been to mental health court, you know that people kind of come up and talk individually in front of the judge, and then people leave, they show up, and it's not kind of, you might call it less collective than recovery court as far as the weekly court hearings that happen. Anybody can go watch recovery court if you ever want to see how it works. It's open to the public like court is. And the one we went and witnessed, probably that the judge and the probation officer witnessed several. We went to Macomb County as SUD treatment people and watched theirs, and we kind of run very similar to Macomb County. Now in recovery court, obviously people get SUD services. That can be anything that we offer as far as SUD services. Can be individual counseling, can be group. Caitlin's going to talk a bit more about group, and can be med-assisted therapy. And several people who are in court get all three. It's just kind of whatever their treatment team work out, their individual choices are considered, and we need to talk about what's going to work for the person. Obviously, recovery court can also encompass inpatient treatment. If that's a level someone is needing at the time, the judge can order it, and it works just like any other person seeking inpatient services. I'm going to turn over to Caitlin a little bit more. I'll have a little bit more to say about how courts kind of changed a little bit over time. And I'm going to let her talk about recovery coaching, the role of the recovery coach in recovery court, and let her take it right here.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Griswold. I am the recovery coach for both recovery court and the SUD services here at CMH. I want to start off by saying I'm honored to be able to do this today in regards to Recovery Month, because recovery is so important in my life and it's something I'm very passionate about. So the role of the recovery coach in recovery court services, I am there to help provide empathetic support for the participants in recovery court, as well as doing that for the treatment team. When we meet up, I'm able to give another perspective. I'm able to advocate for the people that are in recovery court. So I'm able to give a different viewpoint that maybe the treatment team does not see, because I get to share from my own experience in recovery. So one suggestion I made while we had recovery court was 12-step meetings in groups. So now every time after recovery court, I host a 12-step group for the participants where they are able to talk about how they feel and like what's going on in the recovery journey that they may not feel comfortable with talking maybe to their clinician or talking to the probation officer or talking to the judge. So that is something that I think has been beneficial and helpful. So as a recovery coach, the main role is to provide many pathways of recovery to those people that are in it. So in regards to recovery court, they are more 12-step based. They suggest going to AA and NE meetings out in the community. So I'm able to link them with resources to attend those meetings, which is very awesome because that has been my pathway of recovery. So I'm passionate about that. In regards to peer recovery coaching for CMH services, for SUD, we support many pathways. So in those pathways, there is med-assisted treatment that Bill was talking about. There is also harm reduction, faith-based, the traditional 12-step that a lot of people hear about. And what's important about many pathways is I know when I initially got into recovery, I thought there was only one set way of how to be in recovery. And that's not true. And I think that held me back personally from getting into recovery because I wasn't sure of how that worked. So I'm a big advocate to help show that there's many pathways to help with their journey. So the main thing as a recovery coach is to show empathetic support. So like I can be empathetic towards the people that are looking for services and be able to relate to them on a level because I have been through that situation or something similar to that. I'm able to share my own personal story of recovery, where I started from, how I got here, what I continue to do, and the journey that recovery has brought me on. Groups, which we already mentioned and Bill mentioned too, that's a big part here at CMH too. We offer groups, a lot of peer-led groups here that kind of bring people down to the level where they can relate to someone at a peer level and they get to bounce ideas off of each other. Another main thing of a recovery coach is modeling recovery behavior. So like, am I modeling recovery behavior out in the community? Am I integrating community supports, like bringing that stuff back here to help people in their recovery journey? Another big thing for being a peer recovery coach is linking to resources. So luckily over the years, even since I moved out here 5 years ago, the resources in our community in St. Clair County have greatly increased. There's more resources out here that people can attend to help get the support that they need. So that is something that's amazing to see in St. Clair County alone, that we have way more resources for people in recovery and what they want to do with their journey. So another big part of recovery coaching is accompanying the people to appointments. I'm getting to help show them how to advocate for themselves, and then they can bring that on into their recovery as well by advocating and showing them, if they feel nervous to talk to their clinician about something, to help advocate for that person to be able to speak for themselves at a point where they feel comfortable doing that. I think advocacy in regards to recovery is super important, and being able to express like what they want to do and how their recovery path is mapped out. So I think by helping them be able to pick what is going to be the best journey for them is super cool to do. I know for me personally, with my recovery journey, it's been definitely a journey. Certain things that might have worked 3 years ago might not be what I want to do today. So it's a continuous journey of what is going to work for my recovery and benefit me. So I'm able to share that experience with other people and share, that maybe what worked for me 100% might not work for them. And like, let's get to the drawing board and figure out what is going to be the best for your recovery journey, whether it be harm reduction, whether it be, complete abstinence, whether they're into going to church or they want to do secular groups or the traditional 12-step groups that are out in the community. And it's just, going, like I said, to that drawing board. If something's not working, what can we do to help with your journey? What can we help to get to the goal where you want to be? And that's the main part, is figuring out that goal. We got to break down those walls and see what their end goal is, what their result is for this time. And that's a lot of short-term goals. And I think with working in conjunction with the clinicians, it's super awesome that I'm able to talk to the clinicians and they respect my opinion of like, what do you think is going to work for this person? What do you think could help? Like, what is the link that isn't, connecting up? So I'm super grateful to work with a team of individuals that respect my opinion and want to know what we can do to like help better serve the people that we are serving. So I think, in recovery, our health, our physical and emotional health is most important. So peer recovery coaches are help promoting those things. Are you going to doctor's appointments? Are we going for walks? Are we doing things that are good for our emotional well-being and our physical well-being? Another thing is finding homes. A lot of times when we come into recovery, we might not have a stable home. We might not live with people that are conducive to our recovery. We might not have a home and be homeless. You know, there's resources out there to help find housing and three-quarter housing and that in between, you know, if you need that transition period. And the big thing too is to help people find their purpose. What is the purpose that we want to achieve for their recovery journey? And the big thing is linking with the community. So again, community is everything. I think a lot of times in recovery, when we come in, we feel like we're alone and we don't have anyone. So I think the most important thing is being able to talk with a peer or someone in the community so you feel heard, so you feel like you're not alone in this journey. I know when we first start off, that first step of through fear is huge, you know? So even coming to CMH to get services through SUD is a big step. And then it's, you know, knowing that you have people in your corner that are trying to help you on your journey throughout life. So those are the main things I feel like for recovery coaching that has been beneficial. And I think that it is super helpful. Like I said, the empathy. If I didn't have people that listened to me in the beginning of my recovery, I probably would have felt really alone. So advocating for people and being there for people and just being an open ear, you know, if they feel like use is on the horizon or they feel like something's going wrong in life, I'm able to answer the phone and just listen to them and, you know, be an open ear for them. And I think that that's super cool. Yeah. And I'm going to have Bill kind of go over the next little bit. Thank you.
I apologize for our sound problem we had too there. I also forgot to mention, I don't know how many of these folks have been into, but if you have questions, please use the chat room. Caitlin's going to be able to look at the questions on her screen there. We'll try and answer those as we go through. Okay, go ahead. What do we have there?
So the person or their attorneys request recovery report, or is it generally considered for most cases?
Nope, the person and their attorney would. The question was that this person and their attorney request recovery court. Yes, there is a screening process that takes place. Obviously, there's actually two screening processes. The first one is done by the probation officer for recovery court, who, by the way, is Abby Moser, who worked at CMH many, many years ago. And she has a kind of a form of standardized assessment form that she will go through the person more from kind of a legal perspective. Look at their crime, their supports, their willingness to engage in treatment, all those kind of things, and determine if, you know, from the criminal justice aspects, they're good candidates. And then, of course, the person has to request services for CMH SUD program, and if they're not already here, and make sure they qualify here. The biggest reason, you know, people don't qualify for SUD services, most people who request them and can self-identify their use will qualify. The biggest reason we can't take people is if they've been sober too long, which sounds like a strange thing to say, but in the DSM-5, if someone's been sober for not using their drug or alcohol for over a year, they no longer qualify as a disorder. So it sounds kind of bizarre in a way, but to say, no, sorry, you've been doing too good, we can't take you for services. So, but again, most people who are referred to recovery court are not in that boat. They actually have, you know, still struggling with use and they would qualify. There's another question. Okay. So I put up here a brief slide. I'll kind of give you the timeline, which I think I alluded to before. We were going by that fall. The court does operate much like mental health court on incentives and sanctions. Of course, people can violate, like they can any probation, and find themselves with consequences, including community service, brief jail time. Often people come in and say, look, I'm struggling. I'm not doing great. I know I used again. I didn't want to. I'm trying to do well. Then they'll look at a higher level of service care, look at inpatient rehab. The goal is not to, you know, sanction everybody. The goal is to get people better and through the court and successfully complete. So especially if people are aware that they're still not, not where they want to be, the court will take that into account. Here's some data, because obviously these are evidence-based, like a lot of things we do at CMH. Value Recovery Court, now this is from a study in 2017. This is not St. Clair County data. 81% of recipients were engaged after 12 months. Recidivism, which means people who reoffend, commit another crime, are down 8 to 10%. Now, the one that's probably more important to the finance people, every dollar spent in recovery court equals $3.36 saved in criminal justice costs. That's extremely significant. That's a lot of money saved. And of course, with kind of our fresh eyes we're looking at criminal justice with nowadays, the goal, less incarceration, more people getting at the root causes of why people might break the law. You can see the value here of treatment, versus incarceration. And so we talked a little about where does recovery court fit into CMH. So we're still, again, teasing through some of that, but it's its own unique thing. Now, people often ask, how is recovery court funded? This is where we did some modification, if you will, of our numbers, because the recovery court grant, it's grant funded. SUD services, of course, are covered under CCDHC grant, like lots of our other programs. Recovery court is funded through a grant separate from the CCDHC, and the funding, it really only covers treatment costs. It doesn't pay Caitlin, doesn't pay myself, doesn't pay the judge, doesn't pay the probation officer. It really pays for treatment. So the initial plan with recovery court was we were going to take up to 10 people. Okay, it seemed to make sense. And we found within a year is that actually we could take more people than that, because people coming into recovery court, lo and behold, typically had insurance, either Medicaid or private insurance. And we realized, okay, well, that's going to pay for most of their treatment. We don't, have to dole out all the grant money, tons of money, pay people's treatment. It's already covered. It was able to pay for supplemental things, things that go along with treatment. So the money wasn't really spent. That's why the judge said within a few months, let's take up to 20 people. We can do that. The other modification we made is the vast majority of people that got referred to recovery court were actually in for DUI, for driving under the influence. So the judge kind of opened it up, well, let's just focus on those cases. Those are the cases we're going to take. Recovery courts, typically, they're not going to take people with large amounts of drugs they're possessing. They're not going to take other more serious kind of drug charges. Not to say they can't, but that's typically not what they're looking at. They're looking at people with more minor drug or alcohol offenses that treatment would be more of a benefit for. History of staffing, of course, recovery coaches are invested in the recipient. We also have clinical services in SUD. Most of the staffing, and we got to duplicate it. Most people working in SUD are clinicians. It's required that you have a full or limited license in social work and either a certified addiction counselor certification through the Michigan Certification Board for Addiction Professionals, or you can be working on a development plan. So many people that we hired didn't have the full certifications yet, but they're all working on development plans. So we were very fortunate with the recovery court staffing in that kind of two forces aligned. Around the same time we were staffing recovery court, CMH discontinued doing services in the St. Clair County Jail. So we had several jobs open at the time, and the staff from the jail were kind of told, hey, where would you guys like to work? Instead of, hey, we have this job you can go to, that's where you're going. What sounds good to you guys? And Alexis Hadwin, who was our clinician at the jail, recovery court seemed like a good fit to her. She was interested in doing it. So she transitioned over and it worked very well. We were very, I don't say lucky, but the two forces that converged at the same time led to a good outcome. Alexis slid right into that position quickly and easily. She's familiar with jail, she's familiar with criminal justice, so it was a nice transition. Okay, treatment again, we kind of talked about how referral happens. Person has to qualify for treatment and they have to qualify through the screening process there. And they do meet with the judge initially, like mental health court. They have to agree to terms, like in mental health court. Yeah, one of them is you have to agree to waive privilege so the court can know what's going on in your treatment. Same thing with mental health court. And they have to agree, typically, not always, but typically, to urine drug testing and breathalyzing. So initially, at least, those are done pretty frequently, which makes sense. It's only something that happens in mental health court, but it's probably more intense and lasts longer in recovery court. Okay, and there's what Caitlin talked about. Okay, I'm gonna turn it back over to her.
So I'm going to talk a little bit more about recovery court. So with recovery court, when a participant gets accepted into the program, there's different phases that they get to work out through all of recovery court. So there's the first initial phase where they meet with the recovery treatment team weekly. They meet with, weekly with a judge. They meet with their clinician weekly. They meet with me, the peer recovery coach, weekly. They meet with their probation officer. So it's more intense in the first phase of recovery court. I believe after 90 days of sobriety, they get to advance to the next phase, obviously with no blips in the system for themselves or any issues that arise. They get to go to the second phase. So there's 3 initial phases through recovery court. For me as a recovery coach, the coolest thing that I've seen is seeing people come into the program, broken and not understanding like how to put substances down or drinks down, and seeing them grow throughout the program. I think that's like some of the rewardingest things to see, because, we're all focused on them the whole time and assisting them into their recovery. And once they get out of recovery court, like what's that's going to look like for them. So that 2 years that they are in recovery court, they get to get this foundation of recovery built into their lifestyle, and hopefully it'll lead them along the way as they continue that on. So I'm going to touch a little bit about the qualifications here at CMH. We have to be certified through the state of Michigan, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services program. So they offer a recovery coach training. On the screen here, it lists kind of like the different things you have to be in order to apply to get into the recovery coaching class that you have to take. So it's 5 days, like I said. The main things is to start off, I think continuous of 2 years in recovery from addiction is a big one of that, and then receiving publicly funded treatment in the past for themselves. So I know for me, I received publicly funded treatment. So that is one of the qualifications for MDHHS's qualifications to get into being certified as a recovery coach. So I know different agencies might not require MDHHS. I know there's CCAR, there's other ways to get certified as a recovery coach, but for CMH here, this is the qualifications to do that. And it's a pretty cool little thing to do. So let's see. Do you want to put on the next slide? I don't know if there's. Okay, so as I was kind of talking about earlier, a peer recovery coach is an individual with lived experience receiving services and or supports for a substance use condition. So I kind of mentioned this earlier. I know a lot of this is repetitive, but it's super important. We help the person initiate, achieve, and sustain recovery and how that looks for them. So I already talked about med-assisted treatment. CMH has med-assisted treatment here. That is a big thing for people in recovery that is super helpful to guide them on their path. Again, faith-based that I talked about, 12 steps, and then other pathways that there is to recovery. So I know in the training for peer recovery coach certification, they talk about all these things, and these are the multiple pathways of recovery for people. And again, whatever recovery journey is best for them, that best suits. As a peer recovery coach, I help navigate them into what works and to continue to do that for them. Sometimes clients come in and they want to meet with me weekly, or they might want to meet with their clinician weekly and coinciding with the peer recovery coach. Sometimes they meet with me monthly. Sometimes it's just a check-in phone call to see how things are going. I take a lot of people to meetings outside in the community because they might not be comfortable going by themselves yet, and they need that extra support. So those are some of the cool things as a recovery coach that I'm able to do with other people to help them feel more comfortable in this journey that they're going through. And I think there might be. So the benefits to recovery coaching is walking side by side through the process with another person. I said earlier too that, you know, we feel alone when we come into recovery and might not have any supports or any healthy people in our life that can help us sustain recovery and sobriety or harm reduction processes. So they get to, as a recovery coach, we get to walk side by side with them and help them feel like they are important and like this is what they want to do. CMH, like I said, has a lot of resources. We have groups here, community resources. We're allowed to integrate in between all those, and everyone can feed off of each other for different resources. You know, there might be some things here at CMH that we offer that maybe in other areas might not offer. So it's just linking everything up: clothing, food, housing, transportation. You know, all those resources are things that we might take for granted, but in recovery, when we first get around, those are things, you know, that we need. I know when I came into recovery, I did not have barely any clothes, and I'm thankful that someone was able to link me with the clothing options. I did not have a car, so thank goodness for the transportation and the bus system, and you know, out in this area. Like, these are things that I think, again, we take for granted, but as we first get into recovery, these are things that we need, and we need that help to get us to where we got to go or find a job and all those different things. I already talked about creating our own pathway and plan to do that. So again, that drawing board, what looks best to you? What can we try? What's not working? Let's, you know, try again. What can we implement in a whole for that? And then work with clinicians to help assist person-centered and strength-based supports for long-term recovery. I think this is like one of the best tools. After I'm done with this, I'm going to have Bill touch more on the clinical side of it. Like I said earlier, it's super cool that we're able to work side by side with each other. I just had one of our clinicians the other day say, I want to sit down and talk to you. And like, how did you get through this? So I think that was super cool that I was given an opportunity to do that and to help the people feel comfortable with the clinicians. You know, sometimes they might say like, I feel like they don't know what I've been through, and they're able to talk to me about it. And we're able to go, you know, to the clinicians and see what their suggestions are as well. And here's Bill.
Okay, so I know a lot of mental health professionals don't always come into the field saying, I want to work with people with substance use disorders. I didn't, and I don't think a lot of you out there did. Some people do, but it's not often what we, you know, our kind of vision of working in mental health. So recovery coach, I think, can be, it's almost like they're kind of, and I don't want to turn around to sound wrong, like kind of like insiders, like they can help you understand a little bit better what, you know, what that process is like, especially if you didn't grow up in a family where there was substance use disorder, if you didn't have friends maybe that, and just not a lot of real life lived experience. So you can read about stuff in books, but you don't really necessarily get the real feel for what that sort of, you know, life feels like to somebody. So like Kaylin was saying, you know, people often come to her, hey, I want to, what do you think about this, as somebody who's, you know, is more that insider who's lived that kind of thing. Like, what am I missing? What's this person going through, and how do I understand this a little bit better? And I think that's, you know, usually pretty valuable. There was no question about having a recovery coach in recovery court. It was an automatic. They are in almost every drug court nowadays. So it wasn't anything we had to consider. And I think too, you can get some better insight into different sort of things going on out there in the recovery community. My recovery coaches. I mean, obviously, like most clinicians aren't there attending 12-step meetings. They're not in a lot of treatment facilities unless they work there. They're not, you know, sitting in meetings and sitting in groups and things like that, again, unless they're running them, to really see things from maybe the person's point of view with the disorder. So I think it's a real helpful thing for clinicians too. Again, as we hired, I was surprised, and then maybe was a unique thing that happened. A couple of our SUD clinicians are in recovery. So it's kind of a nice thing, and they certainly can relate to what Caitlin does real well, and they have, again, their own kind of insights that they can share as part of their clinical services. The other thing I think is real helpful, just from a clinician point of view, having a recovery coach, besides that additional level of insight, it's knowing that the person's getting more of a rounded experience. It's not just coming into the office, talking to somebody. It's having that additional layer of support that might feel more like somebody who's in, this gets kind of more like in the treatment realm with them, that goes through their own treatment and has their own recovery plan, their own recovery pathway, has done their own treatment, and it's just got that more layer of familiarity, I think, is the best way I can kind of say how it feels as a clinician. Like, hey, there's somebody like in a way like more connected than I might be. We can all provide empathy through good clinical services, but it's not necessarily the same as that real life kind of lived experience that the coaches can provide. As well as, I think, number 2 up on the slide here, link with resources. Again, we're not always out there in the areas in town where there's resources that are kind of more beneficial. I didn't know there was a bookstore down on Quay Street that's recovery based until about 3 months ago, which is sad because I guess it's been there a while. I think they moved now too, so it was on Quay, now it's moved. The whole bookstore, focused more on kind of recovery literature and things like that. And in terms of meta-assisted therapy too, I want to make a note on that, recovery coaching. It's still controversial a little bit, meta-assisted therapy in the recovery community. You still have some, I call them old school people that don't believe you should do that. It's not the way you recover. Many coaches have done meta-assisted therapy, including ones that work here. And so I think they're ones that can bridge that gap, say, hey, it worked for me. It did work for me. It's important in my recovery. It's not going to be for everybody or every substance use disorder, but I can tell you firsthand, I couldn't recover without it. So that, I think, is a nice extra feature that if a coach has gone through meta-assisted therapy or is currently doing it themselves, it's not like the person's going to see that recovery coach as someone who's actively using. They're going to see him as a person who's recovering and is doing really well and is working and has a car and a place to live and all that stuff. And okay, maybe this isn't just another drug user. So I think that's been helpful in that sort of controversy that still lingers out there a little bit.
Hey, Bill.
Any questions right now?
So I've got some questions that I want to read to you. Okay, so the first one is, how long can someone stay in recovery court program? Are there supports that you transition people to after they complete recovery court? Is it just CMH SUD services, or is it something else?
Okay, can't quite hear you. Can you read the question? Gail's going to read the question.
I can't see it.
Oh,
I think it's just.
Can you hear me better now?
All right, I got it. Okay. We already took that one. As far as the attorney, yep, we got that one. Oh, yeah. Okay, that was just one question. Just a second. Yeah, that's all I can see. Oh, I got it. There we go. Sorry. How long can someone stay in the recovery court program? Thank you. I believe it's same sort of as mental health court. I believe it's up to 2 years. Caitlin's giving me a 2, so yep, it's up to 2 years. Obviously, not everybody's going to smoothly sail through that, and like recovery works, it's going to be sometimes some stops and starts and some real progress, and then maybe some struggles. So 2 years is probably reasonable. And I don't think that's an arbitrary number somebody picked out of a hat. It's probably because that's a realistic time frame for a lot of people. Now, some people will cruise through there in 9 months and they'll be going to be doing great and they can move on. We hope everybody continues treatment and continues what's working for them when they leave. But 2 years is the typical time frame, and it's probably a good a good idea for a lot of people. Next question.
What are supports that people can transition to after the complete recovery court? Is it just CMHS services or are there other?
Okay, yeah, okay. Caitlin's gonna take the next question. Want to reread it?
Oh, good Lord. I'm gonna read that next question. Give me 1 second. What are supports that people can transition to after they complete recovery court? Is it just a CMH SED services or are there others? So once someone completes recovery court, they still have the option to stay in CMH SED services, clinical services. And then, as time goes on, if they don't meet criteria for SUD anymore, they can move on to other outpatient services. There's also support groups out there. So 12-step support groups, whatever is help them through a recovery court process, they can maintain. However, they might feel like they did their recovery court and they're done. I think once we feel more statistics after the fact of more people graduation from our recovery court, personally, we can see kind of what people do. I know the few participants that we've had that have graduated still attend meetings in the community. They still do things to help maintain their recovery currently. So that's definitely something, they've been given this platform to build the recovery, and thus far the people that have gone through it continue to do that to maintain their recovery. I guess the next question is, if someone doesn't complete their recovery court program, can they re-enter the program at a later date, or is it only a one-time thing?
That would really depend on the judge, and I don't think we've run into that scenario yet, but I don't think we would not definitely rule that out. It happens in mental health court. People have not successfully completed, and they could offered it again if they had a separate charge. I think it makes sense that we would make it available again. I just don't think we haven't had enough time to run into that yet.
Okay, so I'm going to touch base a little bit on my own recovery story. I think as a recovery coach, sometimes, we don't get to hear, the stories of recovery if we're on the clinical side. Someone asked for me to share it a little bit too. So my recovery journey started off with being prescribed anxiety medication. That was something that I held on to for a while, knowing that my doctor prescribed me something. I thought it was okay. Through 10 years of active addiction, I thought it was an okay idea to try opiates, which probably was my complete downfall. Obviously, using other stuff can be too, but that led me down a path. And with this, just in regards to recovery coaching, it's really cool that I am able to relate with people, especially with the opioid epidemic. It's, a huge thing. I'm not grateful that I was a part of it, but I'm grateful I was a part of it because I'm able to share that light that we can get through it. I think a lot of people that are stuck in opiate addiction, we feel like there's no way out and we're just going to continue to live that life. So I just want to touch base on that. So I got to a point of desperation where I couldn't, continue on, and I lost my car. I crashed my car. I lost my job. I lost my apartment all in the span of 1 week, and I knew I had to do something. I was under the impression to get into treatment, you had to have a lot of money. I didn't have health insurance at that time. And I was like, oh, only people that, have tons of money are people that go into treatment. And I don't want to go to those meetings. Those aren't something, that's for me. I think I have this negative viewpoint in my life. I went to a facility that's kind of like CMH out in Genesee County just to get me set up. They got me resources to get Medicaid so I could go to treatment, and I went to Sacred Heart. I'm super grateful for that experience. I was able to live in a 3-quarter house, which really, really helped my recovery. I was able to live there for 6 months and not have, it was free to stay. So I was able to work that whole time and save money to help get myself on my feet and to get a car and to get an apartment. I know recovery, we hear these stories, you get clean and sober and that's like it, right? And obviously that's not a part of my story. And in that story, there was a relapse, and I think I needed that to happen to get to where I'm at today. That really brought me to a point where I was willing to do whatever it takes. And again, my personal story might not be like other people's, but that is something that, for me, the 12-step community, the 12-step meetings really worked for me. And they talk about in the 12-step thing, one person helping another. I'm just going to omit words because I don't want to offend anyone, but helping other people helping me, people taking me to meetings, people helping on my journey has been awesome. So when I went to treatment the second time, I knew I would do whatever. At that moment, I said I'll do whatever it takes to not pick up a substance again. For me, complete abstinence is what works for me. I've tried harm reduction, I've tried just this or that. So for me, it has to be completely nothing. Obviously, I still smoke cigarettes and I drink energy drinks. So that's in itself, probably caffeine's not good. However, through this journey, I'm able to share that experience, strength, and hope with other people. People have been so great and shared that with me, and I'm able to do the same thing. So when I left treatment the second time, again, got full back into it. I got involved with the recovery community again, and I was able to do that. And now fast forward to 4.5 years later, I never thought I would be doing recovery coaching. However, this is something I'm super passionate about. This recovery is something that has changed my life, has saved my life. And it's something that I want to engage hope in other people that recovery is possible, to help end that stigma. Yes, for people maybe that don't have substance use problems. However, people that are struggling out there that might think that there's no way out, we get to help provide a little bit of help along the way and help assist them, on their journey.
But how helpful is it that you can share with people that you didn't just go recover, you had a, as you put it, a relapse, you got better and you slipped again? To me, that would be important.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I think, even for recovery court, I get to share that because sometimes we do have slips. Sometimes we think it's it is okay to do X, Y, and Z. I think for ourselves, we need to figure out our own path and our own journey and what's going to bring us to the point we want to be. Because I think people get this misconception, you put down something and then you're done, or someone from the outside world might look down and say oh, you stopped using, you should be better now, but that's not the case. It's a continuous journey of working on yourself. So for me, the relapse, I wish it never happened, but I'm glad it did because I wouldn't be where I'm at today for that.
Okay, that's another question, I think.
You talked about receiving help with clothing and public transportation. What are some other resources or supports you found that people need? Maybe things we might not think of. Ooh, let me think on that one. So again, yes, clothing, public transportation. Support resources, sometimes just having that listening ear, you might have someone that doesn't have anyone, to confide in. And I know as recovery coaching, building that trust. So I think sometimes, I know that's necessarily not a resource, but I know that is a support. Sometimes people come to this area and might want to know about churches. So I'm able to bounce ideas off other people, what would work for them. That's a common one I hear for that. I'm trying to think of any other resources.
The other thing from formal perspective, let me throw in there is for the CCBHC, people in SUD services, including we've had a couple people in recovery court that part of their designing their own recovery pathway, they took advantage of some other stuff here. We had two people do yoga. We had a couple people do In Shape. And I know I've had a couple, can't remember if they were mandated or they chose to do anger management. So those are different things available too. It's not community-based resources, but part of helping people with all different ways they can recover. The grant also, I believe, has been able to get some people some stuff like bus tickets or some other things. We've been able to cover some other expenses for people that helped them out, that they were kind of stuck.
So someone asked how has being a recovery coach had an impact on your recovery? I'm not sure if that's in regards to like now. I can kind of answer that broadly. I feel like recovery coaching is completely separate than my own recovery. I have to work on my own recovery separate than recovery coaching. That's something I feel like through working here at CMH, I've learned, if I'm not working on my side of like my recovery on my own time, then it's going to have a little bit of a disconnect with me. So like, if I might be taking people to meetings in the community, for me, I still have to attend meetings for myself because those two, I can't correlate the two together. I can't, mix my recovery up with someone else's recovery. It's super cool and it fuels my fire a lot of times, actually. I think being a peer recovery coach kind of fuels me up and, gets me excited about recovery when, through life, it's like, oh, I got to go do this. But at the end of the day, like, having recovery for myself is what keeps me where I'm at today. Let's see. Do you want to answer that one, Bill? Do you have any advice for a family member of someone with a SUD and how they can help encourage their loved ones to get help?
Yeah, okay, let's try that. So the question was, with someone with a family member that's having active SUD, active disorder, how do you encourage them to get help? There's different schools of thought on that, honestly. Sometimes it's a matter of expressing a lot of concern and empathy, trying to understand maybe what else the person's going through that's leading to some of this increased use. Some of it's understanding and giving the person the feeling that we know, this is something that maybe has gotten away from you. You're not able to kind of control this anymore, and we don't want to see it go any further. And giving them a sense of optimism, sense of hope that there's help for this. It might not mean that your life is forever changed and things like that, but you can recover. You can, have a different outcome in life. Sometimes it's a matter of showing the person, look, this is real things that are happening to you right now. You've lost your job. You've got financial problems. We see this, and people often don't accept that. But sometimes giving them the message that we're concerned, and here's what we see happening, and just kind of be concrete is helpful. The other tool that is a little bit separate from recovery court, but of course we have at our disposal now, is the substance use petition. So someone can be petitioned to this, and this goes back to probate court, for substance abuse treatment kind of without their wanting to be. It's similar to a mental health petition. That's what we do in kind of more extreme cases when other sort of approaches have failed. But there's other, there is this other tool now that's out there that we can help people with here. And certainly getting people in that person's life involved, the people that they're close to, that they trust the most, and see if they can have conversations with them like that. Another question, looks like? Or is that?
How long does a person get to work with a recovery coach at CMH?
Let me put in there too. Typically, SUD services are targeted for about a year, with the exception of med-assisted therapy. Those people we know are going to require longer term work with us because it's a requirement of getting most med-assisted therapy is being in treatment. But working with a recovery coach, obviously, if you're still in treatment, you could work with a recovery coach as long as you're here. There's also, let's touch real quickly, there's other recovery coaches out there in the community besides the CMH.
So yeah, other agencies have recovery coaching through there. I know FAN has it, Family Against Narcotics. BW Rock has recovery coaching. Odyssey, I believe, I know for sure that they have recovery coaching. So there are other, if they maybe phase on from here through their journey at CMH, there are other ways to get involved with other recovery coaching, you know, and other community resources with that. So
Yeah, so
there's no time limit.
You transition out of CMH, it's not like your recovery coaching is over. You can get it other places for other kind of mechanisms. I was trying to think, do you know how many recovery coaches do we employ right now? I know one is a case manager and one's a clinician now, so they're not there. There's 5 active. Okay. We have a couple that are also peer supports that qualify as both. So, okay. I'm just trying to remember everybody.
Yeah. So yeah,
ones we
even
don't know
here,
yet.
they might be able to, if they wanted to still stay at CMH, there's still recovery coaching here that might not be for the SUD department only.
Okay, yeah, so people in mental health services move to less restrictive treatment programs, they can still access it a lot of times. Any more questions? We got a couple more minutes. One thing I don't think you did touch on the group you do, which is kind of it's not 12-step exactly, but it's kind of based on your recovery coaching work. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, so the group I do at CMH is a relapse prevention group. So a lot of times in recovery, we need to learn urges, triggers, cravings, how to deal with those things, making an actual relapse prevention plan, which I think is super important to do, to know who to call, you know, if we run into a situation, goals that we want to have through recovery. So the group that I do here at CMH is based on relapse prevention and tips for other people, you know, where they get to talk about what's helping for them and then what's worked for me. And we all get to like correlate together on that. I think those are super important things to know, you know, in recovery, like, because those are things that are going to happen. You know, you might be walking down the street and you see something and it just reminds you of that. So it's good to be aware of what that next step is, to what to do. Who do we call? You know, can we call up your recovery coach? Can we call our friend? Can we call our sponsor if they're working, you know, 12 steps? Are they, you know, maybe someone in the church that they're affiliated with? Just having people to reach out to and having a set plan of like who they can reach out to. And then the group for recovery court is like a 12-step based group. So we do readings from both NA and AA, and we kind of talk about that. So that gives them additional piece of people that they're comfortable with, and they get to embrace kind of like what the 12 steps are about for them too.
All right. Thanks so much, Bill and Caitlin, for your time and all of your information today. That was a lot of really awesome content. And thanks for everyone for attending this session. Today's presentation was one of many webinars scheduled through the month of September, which is Recovery Month. You can still register for any upcoming sessions on our website at sccmh.org. Thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. For anyone receiving CEs today, a survey will pop up on the end of the webinar. Please fill that out, especially if you want those credits, because we will need that info from you.